When a skeletal muscle fiber receives an adequate stimulus, the excitatory wave travels from the point of stimulation to the ends of the fiber. If we stop the excitation wave and examine the fiber, we are able to distinguish 5 different regions. A region at rest A, a transitional region B, a completely activated region C, a region of recovery D, another region at rest E. Let us examine more closely the actual process of activation. In the resting region A, the cell membrane is electrically polarized. The inside of the fiber is negative with respect to the outside. In the active region C, the inside of the fiber is negative with respect to the outside. In the transitional region B, the electric resistivity of the membrane is markedly reduced. This leads to a passage of currents with a maximum density in B. Electric currents leave the surface of the membrane at rest, headed for the inside of the fiber. Other currents flow from the inside of the activated membrane, directed towards the surface. Within the fiber, the currents are directed from the active region to the resting one. In the extracellular medium, the currents flow from the region at rest to the active zone. These currents spread out to all the available conducting medium, that is, to all the tissues of the body. Isopotential lines can be drawn uniting the points in the conducting medium which are at the same potential. Those lines are perpendicular to the direction of the currents. The distribution of the isopotential lines outside the fiber is similar to the one observed around a dipole, whose positive and negative poles are situated at the 2 ends of the transitional zone. In the heart muscle, the fibers are connected by bridges forming a tridimensional reticulum through which the excitatory wave can spread in all directions. At the border between the resting and active region, the excitation wave can be compared to a layer of neighboring dipoles. In the human heart, here seen in a horizontal section, the front of the excitation wave at the beginning of ventricular invasion is located in the left part of the interventricular septum. The currents start at the resting regions headed for the activated ones. For the sake of clarity, the resistivity of the thoracic tissues was considered to be homogeneous. The currents spread out to all the tissues of the body and are also present on the body's surface. It can be seen that the current lines point towards the precordial region. From there they diverge, running along the chest walls and finally converging in the dorsal region. From there, the currents re-enter and join the negative side of the excitatory wave. The distribution of the isopotential lines shows that on the body's surface, point A is a potential maximum and point B is a potential minimum. In a later stage of ventricular invasion, there are 2 excitatory waves, one traveling towards the left ventricular apex and the other towards the base of the right ventricle. The presence of 2 excitatory waves produces a more complex distribution of currents. On the chest surface, there are 2 potential maximum A and A prime and 2 minima B and B prime. The location of the potential maxima and minima on the chest is correlated with the intracardiac position of the various excitatory waves. When the activation process is altered, the number of maxima and minima, the time of appearance, and the region in which they appear are also altered. Let us see how it is possible to determine practically the number and location of the potential maxima and minima on the human chest. The patient's skin is washed with spirit, and about 250 spots are marked on the anterior and posterior surface of the chest. First, the patient is photographed, then laid on a couch in a Faraday cage. "250 electrocardiograms are sequentially recorded by leading off from the spots that had been marked on the skin. 3 to 6 simultaneous recordings are taken each time using a multi-beam cathode ray oscilloscope. The tracings are registered on a film and optically enlarged. The instantaneous voltages are carefully measured and reported on a map of the region explored. Equipotential lines are then drawn on every map, representing the surface potential distribution at a given time. The operation is repeated for successive times. By photographing successively the maps, one can obtain a motion picture illustrating the time-varying potential distribution on the chest surface during the different phases of the cardiac cycle. The next sequence will show the chest potentials of a normal subject. During atrial activation, and ventricular activation, the chronology of the electrical events is indicated by the electrocardiogram progressively appearing at the lower end of the figure. These are the repolarization potentials. Let us examine these pictures more closely. The white lines show the positive, the black ones the negative potentials with respect to Wilson's central terminal. The potential values are given in millivolts. At the beginning of ventricular activation, the superficial currents go from the anterior maximum to the posterior minimum. This distribution is related to the septal wave already illustrated. In a next phase of invasion, the excitatory wave is directed towards the apex. The potential maximum will then be located near the apical region, the minimum near the right shoulder. Later on, the excitatory process reaches the surface of the right ventricle. Two separate excitation waves are created in this way, leading to the complex distribution of the currents which we have already described. The potential pattern on the chest surface shows two minima, one maximum, and one saddle. The pattern of currents is also very complex. The excitatory wave invades then the posterior wall of the left ventricle, and the potential maximum migrates towards the posterior chest wall. Another wave originates probably in the crista supraventricularis and gives rise to another maximum in the higher sternal region. Only one minimum and one maximum can be seen during ventricular repolarization. In this case of true dextrocardia with situs inversus, the maps of chest potentials are the mirror image of the normal maps. In right bundle branch block, at the beginning of ventricular activation, the pattern of potentials is similar to the normal one, but the potential minimum, which normally appears in the sternal region, indicating right ventricular activation, is absent. During the last portion of the R wave, one can see at the same time the surface potentials related to activation of the left ventricle and right ventricle. This multipolar distribution cannot be predicted or deduced from usual limb and precordial electrocardiograms. The left potentials disappear as in the normal subject after 8 to 9 hundredths of a second, as could be expected. Only the right ventricular potentials remain and persist on the right precordium till the end of the QRS complex. During repolarization, the surface potential gradient is reversed with respect to the one observed during the depolarization of the right ventricle. In this patient with a normal electrocardiogram, the maps show, at the beginning of ventricular activation, an interior electronegative region which is never observed in the normal subject. The patient had had in the past an anterior myocardial infarction, apparently cured but clearly revealed by the maps, although the electrocardiogram had become normal. These results show that equipotential maps contain much more information on the electrical activity of the heart than can be offered by limb and precordial electrocardiograms usually recorded in current clinical practice. In some cases, the chest maps enable us to discover severe cardiac lesions which were not revealed by the usual electrocardiographic records.